Hey everybody, welcome to In the Pit podcast. I am your host, Chris Sturk, and on today's episode, I have a special guest with me, fellow photographer John Indiveri. We're going to sit down and talk about his process, but he's not only a music photographer, he's also a photographer for all sorts of stuff, music events, corporate functions, family reunions. We're going to talk about it all, kind of get into his brain and see what's going on with him. So if you want to find out more about this podcast, go to f28live.com. Click on the podcast link and you'll see all the information for the guests that we have on our episodes. So you'll also see one for John with all of his links to his websites and also an overview of our interview today. So go ahead and check out f28live.com and make sure that you do also subscribe to our newsletter, which you'll get free updates on all of the new stuff. So I'm going to welcome right now, John. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm glad that you came on with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So one of the things that we're going to dive into is you're a photographer, but you're not just a music photographer. You've actually do all sorts of kinds of photography. So give us an idea, the listeners that we have here. The music photography, we're going to talk a little bit more about that throughout the podcast. But what other photography do you work in and what stuff have you done?
Yeah, mainly commercial photography work. So things for brands, for their Amazon listings, websites, social media. I engage with, as a freelancer with different brands and companies to take pictures and have a visual representation of the brand.
Is there any kind of brand that you've worked with that we might be aware of that we might know of?
Yeah. A lot of them have been smaller type of startups, but I've done stuff with, I'm not sure if people are familiar with Reeds, with Cola Tree, B&B Knives.
Oh, B&B Knives. I know that. Yeah. My brother is a big knife guy. So yes,
yep.
I know that one very all too well.
Yep. So, those are just some of the ones that some folks might know of. And then there's been, again, a slew of more smaller startup brands out there, folks starting, their Etsy shop or Shopify shop and trying to get some pictures done for the website so they can market their stuff out there.
Now, to let people know, you're based out of South Florida, correct?
That's correct, yep.
Now, how long have you been doing photography for?
Professionally?
Or just, even when you started, because I know we all start someplace, so even just kind of when you started.
Yeah, when I started, it was probably elementary school.
So you're talking about way back in the day.
Way back in the day. But
that's definitely a long history of photography.
Yeah, and again, it's on and off, type of things. Taking pictures around, the house, and then when I was in my skating phase of my younger life, taking photographs of friends skating and all that, and then it really picked up more so probably in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of the more professional stuff.
Did you have a particular interest in photography? Is there a reason why you started doing it? Was it something that you just saw for me, the reason why I asked that, for me, I saw a photograph from National Geographic when I was a kid of Steve McCurry, the Afghan girl. And when I was a kid, I fell in love with photography when I saw that magazine because I was amazed that something like that could be captured. And it was just kind of this amazing moment. Was there a time that you were like, I love photography, this is why I want to do it? Or is it something that you just had an interest in and you kind of just grew with it?
Well, it's something I had an interest in and kind of grew with it. And this might be the case with a lot of people out there. My folks had a camera, but this is back in the film days.
Yeah, I know those days. I know those days.
Right. So it was, I had, an interest in doing it from that respect and learning how to, take the shot, the right exposure, the lighting, and then also learning how to develop it in a darkroom. And kind of, just kind of grew from there. And then just having that ability to kind of capture a moment, in time. This is cheesy as it might sound, but it's really, piqued my interest and being able to kind of capture those moments for other people too. So that's really kind of how it began.
Did you have a point for me when I started doing photography? The hardest part for me to wrap my head around was understanding manual mode. That was the toughest part for me to learn. And now I learned on an SRT 202 Minolta 35 millimeter camera. And I remember a buddy of mine, he went to college for photography, and he was trying to explain the whole entire thing to me. When you started off, did you have these road bumps where it was just like you would get frustrated and just be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, it's just way too hard? Or was it something that just kind of came to you naturally?
I mean, I wouldn't say it came to me naturally, but it was definitely a process in learning, manual mode. And then obviously later on, my concert photography, came a little bit later on. And then learning how to do manual mode within a concert setting was a whole other thing.
Extremely difficult. Yeah, it's extremely difficult.
So it was kind of like relearning it all over again. I mean, you have the basics, but it's kind of really relearning it all over again with the lighting situation and, the speed situation and all that. Yeah.
That's one of the things that when I talk to, or I get questions from aspiring photographers coming up, they always ask is music photography completely different from other photography styles? And I absolutely say yes.
Yeah.
Because you're not really in a controlled environment when you're in a music scene. I mean, you've got lights going everywhere. And so not like a wedding or even like a portrait, that kind of thing. You can control the light when you want to, but music is so different. You have to understand how to use manual mode once you're in there and kind of how to understand how light works. When you started doing your photography, do you remember, I always like to ask this, do you remember the first photo shoot that you did? The one that was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm getting pretty good at this. Like I can start to do this.
Overall?
Yeah.
I would, man, that's hard to kind of point down. I would say probably many years ago in high school, when I went to a pro skating competition. And I used to live up in the Northeast. So it was in New York City.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that must have been a sweet time.
So it was a lot of fun, and brought the camera along and was able to, take photos. And looking back at them now, again, they're printed. They're not, on the computer. But, looking back at them now, it's like, oh my God, those are so awful. But, being able to do that and getting these guys, doing the tricks and flipping in the air and all that, really was kind of a moment to me where, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do.
And I can imagine too that you probably learn a lot with doing that, because the constant movement, you have to understand really your composition and how you set it up to freeze that moment. The one thing I always wanted to do, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and one of the things that I always wanted to do as a kid, and I never really did, even though all of our friends were skaters pretty much, I never got to photograph skateboarders. And I've wanted to do it for years. How long did you wind up, after high school, did you continue photographing skate kids, or did you just kind of move on to other things?
Yeah, I kind of moved on, to other things. When I got into college, I didn't, photograph as much before getting, back into it, afterwards. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really continue it, after that. But, it's still what they do now is amazing.
It's some of the stuff that I watch, and I still occasionally watch skate videos. I still have the VHSs. that's how old school it is. I still got the VHS, and I'll occasionally click it in, and you'll hear that music in the background, and it just brings me back to trying to be a kick-ass kid on a skateboard doing my thing. Now, when during college, you said you didn't take pictures too much during that time. When did photography kind of kick up again as being like a primary thing for you? About
3 or 4 years ago was when I really kind of, I kicked back in for me to kind of be a primary, and again, it was more of like a side hustle thing. Mm-hmm. But, that's when I really kind of kicked back in where, I picked up the camera again and really just started going with it. And then the music photography came, a little while later.
And do you primarily, I have looked at some of the stuff, and you've worked with a couple different bands on here. How did you get into the music photography aspect? Was this something that you had talked to a local band and started shooting for them and then got into the bigger names, or how did it work out for you?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So, I had, an interest in doing it. I've always, going to concerts, I'm a big concert guy, my wife and I, and I've always seen, the photographers, hustling in the pit and running around the venue, and thought, it was, thought it was really, it's pretty cool. So one day I just decided, through, social media, reach out to some folks that do it and kind of get their take on how they got started with it and everything. And that's where it really kind of began for me. It was just by first, talking to some people, and they had suggested, which is what I would suggest to anybody, is, just start local, really small. So for me personally, what I did was I would go to, the local bars or breweries around that had live music and start shooting that way. And then from there, I kind of graduated up into doing more of the national touring acts that would come around. And that's when I started linking up with, online magazines. And that's really kind of, really how you kind of get into these venues to get photo passes, is you kind of be attached, as you know, to some sort of publication.
Yeah, that's one of the things, again, one of the most common questions I get is, how do you get into it? And I think a lot of people, especially starting off, I think they have this kind of unrealistic view of how you actually get into it. And I always tell people, you got to start from the ground up. Like, you got to start photographing shows, because even a lot of these bands and publicists and managers that you work with, now, if you're working independently, it's kind of a different story than working with a publication. They're kind of two different parts there. But yeah, a lot of people ask me going, well, I just kind of want to do this. Can I send in my stuff? 99% of the time, if you're an independent photographer and you go into that situation, they're going to look at your portfolio. If your portfolio is not good enough, they're not going to let you in. 99% of the time, they're going to push that out. So, I mean, for me, I started, in 2005, I think, or 2006. And one of the bands I photographed was this AC/DC all-woman cover band. Nice. And that leads into things. So it's one of the things that you probably get this too, people asking you, is just, how do I get into it? And it's a good point you made, that people have to understand. You kind of have to start from the bottom. Like, you have to kind of build your craft and then start working on your portfolio. What was the first band that you had sent out to that gave you that go ahead? Like, hey, yeah, come on in, photograph us, and, we'll work with you.
Yeah, that was, so I reached out to a PR company that did the PR for Bless the Fall. So that was my first, big, national, touring act that I got into. Was, because by that point, I built up a little bit of a portfolio from shooting, some local bands and all that. And, the PR company, gave me a chance. It was a smaller show, at a club down here. And, they gave me that shot, and that's really kind of how I kept being able to get into, all the other shows as I progressed, in my craft.
That kind of opportunity opened up the door for you. What was is there publications that you do work for right now, or do you do it pretty much independently?
Most recently, I had my own publication, actually, Music Lore and Media.
Oh, great.
Obviously, since, concerts kind of stopped, I kind of wound it down a little bit. So, but prior to that, I was with another publication, where, a bulk of the stuff that I did was under them. And they had a pretty good reach on social media and on their website. They had pretty good traffic. So that allowed me to get into some of the larger ones, like, Bring Me the Horizon and a few others.
Oh, you did Bring Me the Horizon?
Yeah, last year, last January.
Gosh. I'm jealous.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. Arena show. But I gotta tell you, like, their production has gotten a lot bigger over the years, and the stage is so high. It was ridiculously high. So, you had to have a zoom lens, or you had to wait for one of them to kind of come to the edge of the stage to see him.
It was crazy. We photographed Sheryl Crow. This is years ago, and it was at the Walnut Creek Amphitheater here in Raleigh. And the theater's already high. The place fits about 20,000 people. For some unbeknownst reason to me, the staff of this tour decided to put a stage on top of the stage, and then a platform on top of that stage that they just put on top of the other stage.
Right.
And I remember walking in with the other guys, and we're all in the pit, and we all look at each other like, how the hell are we supposed to photograph this show? Like, we can't even see them. And what's funny is that I had to be over to the side of the actual stage just to get a shot of Sheryl Crow until she actually walked up to the front part of the stage. So it's amazing to me that, that it's funny that you say that. I just thought of that story in my head, that it's just, they do layer the stage upon stage, and I don't know why they do this.
Yeah, that's basically, exactly what they did. It seemed like they built two stages on top of each other. It's an arena, so there's, no stage there to begin with, but it seems like they built the stage on top of a stage. And, and there was a good number of photographers at the show too. So they kind of had to split us up into groups, and, one group was on one side of the stage, one group was on the other side, because they had, a runway that jutted out. So all they can go out into the crowd a little bit more. But it was interesting. It was definitely a very interesting show. It's a great show. But yeah, it was just unfortunate that the stage was that high. It was ridiculous.
That's one of the most exciting parts to me, really, about the shows when you get in there, is being in the pit. Really, it has this incredible feeling to it when you're in there. And I don't know how to describe it. What was like the first kind of reaction you had, or that first feeling you had once you entered the pit for the first time?
For the first time, it was nerves. You're in there with, what you think is probably a lot, more experienced photographers than yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And in some cases that's correct. In some cases there's, beginners in there as well. So it was one of those things where it's like, oh man, I hope I don't run into anyone, trip over anything, So a lot of the shows, that I would shoot, that I still shoot, are smaller, venues, down here. Apart from the amphitheater and everything, I do a lot of shooting at a club called Revolution Live, and they get a lot of good bands that come through there. But the pit area itself, is only so big. It's not like when you're at an amphitheater or an arena where you have a lot of room.
Yep.
You can easily get around people, and in here it's, you're, it is, you're running back and forth between people and trying not to hit them while they're taking their shot. And so it's obviously, a lot, it was a lot of nerves going into it, but then afterwards, you get into a groove and you get a little bit more comfortable. And then there's that feeling of turning around and you're seeing, depending, where you are, 1,000 people behind you.
Yes,
and then you realize
surreal.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, it's surreal, and especially when I did my first amphitheater showing, I turned around and looking out there. There's how many thousands of people that the amphitheater fits in there, and it's a surreal experience. And they're not looking at you, but
no, yeah.
It's still that feeling of, well, I can basically reach up and touch the band, so I'm like right there. So it's definitely a feeling where you turn around and you see all these people. It's crazy.
I remember one of the first major shows I did was for a radio station called QDR, and it was actually Pulse FM and QDR were the two that I started with years ago. And I remember going to photograph Wiz Khalifa, and he was opening up for, I think, Fall Out Boy at the time, which was a weird setup. I don't know why they had it that way, but anyway. So I remember going out, and this was really my first big show, and I had the same intimidation factor. Like, I walked in and literally thought, why am I here? Like, I don't think I should be here, because you see these other photographers who, and actually a couple of them I've become good friends with over time, been doing it for 30, 40 years. And you see them got cameras that you could never, ever afford in your life, when you walk in. And so all of that intimidation. So I remember walking in, and I just looked at these guys, and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I was like, all right, well, I'll give it a try at least. And then walking in the pit, I turned around, 20,000 people. I was hooked. I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is exactly where I want to be. So it's pure excitement. A lot of people kind of forget that aspect, that when you go into it, starting as a photographer, you're going to have those moments where you have like, why am I here? I shouldn't be here kind of thing. Have you ever had any moments where you had that kind of like, oh, I shouldn't be in this place right now?
Oh yeah. Like in the beginning, it was definitely, as you're learning also just to do, photography in a setting like a concert, and taking the shot and looking, at what you just shot, and you're like, what the hell is this? You start getting like, kind of frustrated, but, at the end of the day, it's a learning process. And, you might look at, at that photo you just took, and you just have to keep thinking to yourself, I'm going to get better. Practice makes perfect, as cheesy as it sounds, it's true. And then you look at other folks. I had the same thing. I look at these guys and gals that had these really expensive cameras, and I'm never going to be able to afford that. But at the end of the day, too, you don't need to have that caliber of a camera necessarily.
Absolutely.
Definitely not at the beginning. So it's not even something people should even think about. I started on a T3i, and I used that for a while. So it's just about, learning and having, confidence in yourself and not getting down on yourself, really.
Yeah, I always say to people, start with what you got. I started with the Nikon D40, and that was like a whopping 6.1 megapixels of powerhouse. Not really. It wasn't a powerhouse at all. But that's what I started off with. And there's a lot of people that do think that, okay, if I want to get into this, if I want to be able to do this, and you might admire some of the photographers that you're following, they automatically think, oh, I need that camera.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that photographer, it might have taken them years just to get up to that camera gear so that they can continue to go in there. So that's a great point, and I think that will help also a lot of people listening, that it isn't necessarily that you need to have the best camera. Use what you have, and then just
use what you have and
for that.
Exactly. Use what you have, use it well, learn, and then as time goes on and progresses, then you can upgrade. And I always say, upgrade the lens before you upgrade the body.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Because I found myself taking better pictures, at least with a 50mm f1.8 at the time when I was using a kit lens, which kit lenses are not bad. I'm not saying they're bad. So anybody listening, they're still good. But once you start to upgrade to better glass, you'll start to see that you have a little more options to play with once you're in the pit for that. So yeah, that's a great point. I hope anybody listening, because I get asked that a lot, do I need to get this, D4 or D5 or this Canon, camera or whatever? I'm like, no, just take what you have and just go and have fun with it. When you started getting everything kind of set up for the music, what was your process of reaching out to these publicists or publications? Like, what did you do to kind of say, hey, I'm here, I'm interested in doing this? What was your process?
Yeah. So, I always recommend, when people are looking to do this is, do research online, YouTube videos. And I'm forgetting the name of the channel now, but I happened to see this, I searched this exact thing. I'm like, okay, how do I get in touch with PR people? And what I did was I saw this video from this guy that said, this is how you should email a PR person. And basically, I took a version of that, kind of crafted it in my own way, and just started reaching out, saying, hi, my name's John Indiveri. I'm a photographer. I'm in this area. I'd like to shoot this band. Here's a link to my portfolio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just start, researching who the PR person was for that particular band, and also subsequent bands that are on the ticket as well. So not just the main act. A lot of times you're probably going to want to try to hit the opening band first, and try to get in with them. So whether it's if they have a PR person, great. If not, you email them directly, and try to get in that way. And that's really kind of how I built a relationship with a lot of the bands and PR people is by doing that at first. And then once you have that relationship, they kind of know who you are. It gets a little bit easier after that.
How did you find the emails or the contacts that you were to get a hold of the bands?
Yeah. So a lot of them list it on their Facebook page. Surprisingly. So I found a lot. That
surprised me too.
It wasn't the first place that I went to look. So I eventually went to Facebook, and a lot of their contact info is right there on Facebook. And if I couldn't find it, then, it was just a lot of Google searching on, okay, this is a company. Well, I don't really know if this is the right person to contact. So I'll just email somebody. That was the publicist and said, if you're not the right person, I apologize. Can you please forward me to the right person that covers this band? And I'd say, 9 out of 10 times they would.
Yeah.
And then kind of go from there.
That's one thing too I want to bring up and talk about is the rejection aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I first started out, I was rejected all the time. It was just constant. Yeah. And the first band for me that gave me the opportunity. Now, I'd done stuff with the radio stations before, but they were taking care of that. They were, doing all the stuff, and they would say, hey, Chris, come on out. We got your pass. We'll go out and do this. When I started F28 I think it's now on 6 years. 6 years ago, I wanted to do more than what the radio station was doing. And I remember I sent out and out and out to all of them. And I would get letters back, denied, declined, no thank you, we appreciate your time. And you start to get this point that you start to doubt yourself, that you should even be kind of doing this. At least I did, from all the rejection I was getting.
Right.
But the one band for me that gave me that opportunity was Blues Traveler. And
not a bad one.
their publicist had written back to me and said, hey, Chris, we like your stuff. And I said, well, I'm actually trying to shoot for F28 is what I'm trying, my publication. She goes, okay, yeah, come on out. When you started dealing with and you got those rejections, how did you handle it?
I obviously, I thank them, for their time, and looking over, my requests, everything. But I didn't take it personally, because I had to imagine, and it's true, that, these folks are getting emails from, photographers probably on a daily basis. And depending on the tour and depending on the location, they only have so many, passes available for photographers, so it's one of those things where, if you get rejected, don't take it personally. It's either one, you're just starting out. There's really, because what they're looking for is, what these publicists are looking for is, obviously great content, but also an audience behind it.
Yes, that's true.
So if you're, just starting out and you're not, say, attached to a publication, or say even if you are, and it's, they don't necessarily have a large reach, that might, unfortunately have, the PR person might say, I'm going to give the pass to this person who does it for this magazine that has, 10,000 followers on Instagram and, seems to have a good web presence and all that. So it's just, it's just one of those things. You don't take it personally. You keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And it doesn't hurt to try to develop a relationship with that person too. It's a relationship-based business. So that's the one thing that I can definitely say is, build a relationship with these folks. If they email you back and say, no, thanks, email them back and say, okay, thank you. Don't just ignore the email, definitely email them back. And, we want them to be on your radar, so to speak.
Very good point. Very good point.
So you want to be on their radar, and, the more you communicate with them, the better. So it's got to a point with some of the PR folks now where I just email, and they know, I don't have to do the whole spiel again. They know who I am and who I shoot for. I just say, hey, I want to shoot, is there room? And they say either yay or nay.
It's funny with the kind of spiel part that you send out. I, for some reason, cannot stop writing the spiel, even though most of these publicists I know, and they'll even write back. I had one write back to me and say, Chris, we know it's you. You don't have to tell. You don't have to tell us. Yeah. But in my brain, it's just locked in, and so I have this whole entire paragraph I write. So for me, but a friend of mine, Michael, a fellow photographer, he was showing me, what he sent, and it just basically just goes, hey guys, you got any? Question mark, and that's it. And they'll write back being like, yep or no kind of thing, and he'll move on because he's worked with a lot of them and built those relationships. Yep. When you start doing the shows and getting prepped for the shows, is there a certain kind of thing that you do? Some people talk about how many cameras they bring with them, certain lenses they bring with them. You talked a little bit about that you'll watch a YouTube video and so on. Do you watch a YouTube video of the show before you actually go and photograph it?
Depending, yeah. Depending on the show, definitely. So, like, say for example, August Burns Red. Luckily, I saw them play before, so they're so good.
So good.
But their LD, their lighting designer, is amazing. But it's amazing in the sense of the show for the spectator, not necessarily for the photographer.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I would. Definitely with them, I've been to their show, once before, up in Orlando, and then that was prior to, me shooting. And then I wound up, kind of watching some of their live stuff, just kind of get an idea of, okay, what's the lighting look like? Mm-hmm. What's the pace look like? And, I like to do, I do like to do a fair bit of research before going in, especially if I haven't shot, the band before. I want to see how often do they move across the stage? Are they, more stationary, or are they like, Howard from Light the Torch that doesn't stop moving? So, it's definitely, you definitely, I like to do a little bit of research before going into it.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand as well, that when you're getting ready for it, I'll watch certain artists and some artists and bands I might not have heard of, but the publicist will reach out saying, hey, can you come cover them? And you do have some artists that just stand there, don't do anything, and you have to try to figure out this way to create, a great photograph to be able to represent that artist in your article. So you try to find all these things you're moving around. But yeah, it's funny when you watch these shows and then you go to these different bands and they're everywhere. I mean, the energy is just on the top, and you're trying to photograph this, and it's like you feel like you're, we're chicken running around with your head cut off. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy during it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to work out. You got to work out, and that's for sure.
Especially if you carry 2 cameras, that's the only thing that you got to worry about when you're in there. Is there certain lenses that you use that you bring with you that you kind of like, okay, these are my top lenses that I'm always having with me, or is there, you just kind of fluctuate your gear?
To be honest, like at first when I was starting out, I'd bring, a couple lenses with me, in a camera bag and everything. And then I graduated to just bringing my one camera, one lens, and that's it. Depending on the show. But for most of the time, it's just, I'm bringing my Sigma 30 millimeter, with my Sony, and that's really it.
It's funny, the more you do it, the less amount of gear you take with you.
Yeah. You're lugging it around, and you learn that it's heavy and you have all the stuff with you, and sometimes you don't necessarily need it. If you're doing a festival or something like that, then I have a couple different lenses with me. But if I'm just doing, say, a club show, I'm bringing one lens mainly, and that's it. And I'm able to pull off what I need to pull off, and it works out.
And the best, to me, the best kind of composing a shot is moving your body back and forth, like moving it closer or backing it away if you need the kind of shot. I used to take a lot of ridiculous gear with me when I first started. I'd have like 4 lenses, 2 camera bodies, and a bag. And I had this huge backpack I carried with me. And I remember walking in, and this guy named Scott, he works for a publication, super nice guy. He's been doing it for many, many years. He looked at me and he goes, why are you carrying that bag? Like, that's so big. And when you're in the pit, it's actually taking up more area, when everybody's kind of running around. So after he said that years ago, I was like, all right, I'm just going to kind of narrow down my stuff. So I'll normally shoot with either a 50, but I actually been loving recently the 85.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why, even though you have to back up to kind of get a little bit of a wider shot on there, but for some reason that one is just some kind of lens to me. But yeah, it's funny when you start to do it more and more, you have a lot of people that bring everything with them, and then when you start to get more experienced at it, you just kind of narrow down the gear to what you really need.
Exactly.
To utilize it on there.
Exactly. And in the beginning, it's starting out, I think it's fine, bringing multiple lenses because, you're learning what works, what doesn't work. If it's a venue that you figure you'll be shooting at, frequently, then it's good to kind of test things out, and then you kind of hone in on what you actually need, and then go from there.
Now, when you're doing it and you get the confirmations to do these shows, do you have to sign a photo release when you get them?
It depends on the band. I've only had to do it, I think 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. So I had to do it for Dirty Heads and 311, Bring Me the Horizon, and I think Earth Day Birthday, which is a festival up in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the only 3 that I had to. Other than that,
Have you ever had one come in that you turned down?
A photo release or just a show?
Photo release, or they gave you, or do you want to do the show, but they gave you the photo release, and it was basically asking for everything, like the rights to everything, and you had to turn it down?
Fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that. A lot of the photo releases, not a lot of them, it's only been 3, but the ones that I've gotten have been, they did explicitly state on there that, the copyright is yours, but, you can't, like, Bring Me the Horizon, for example. It's stipulated on theirs that, you can't, sell the photo. The rights are yours and everything, but they're prohibiting you from, like, selling the photo. And, I did teeter back and forth on it, first, but I'm like, It's Bring Me the Horizon. So, so I just said, you know what, fine, whatever. And I signed it and shot the show. And, I mean, I don't sell a lot of prints anyway. So it didn't really matter that much to me, but, fortunately I haven't had one that said, all the, the rights of the photos belong to us, because I would absolutely turn down a show if that's the case.
I had one, and it was Kenny Wayne Shepherd. And I photographed Kenny Wayne Shepherd opening up for Van Halen years ago, and he was doing a show at the Durham, I think it's the Durham Performing Arts Center. And so I was like, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, oh man, amazing guitarist. I was like, let's see if we can cover him. So I send out an email to them, and I get an email pretty quickly back from the management team. It says, hey, Chris, thank you so much. Here you go. Here's a release. Sign that, send it back to us, and we'll give you, the logistics of what you need to do. So he sends over the release to me, and I start reading it. And the release was, I'm not kidding, this is not a joke or made up. He wanted all the raw photographs from the show that were taken, all of them, but he wanted 30 of them within a week, and he wanted 3 of them that night, raw, unedited. Also, on top of that, their team gets full rights to the photographs. They are no longer mine. So they would be able to sell, use them, edit them. That's why they wanted the raw ones, so they could edit them. So all this stuff, and I was just amazed because I had never received a release like that before. And
that's a little excessive.
Yeah, I wrote back, and very nice letter. I mean, that's the thing that, too, a lot of people don't understand is that don't be a dick. Politely write, but even if it's something that you think's a little absurd, don't be a jerk. A lot of these people work with different artists and different publications. So I sent back an email message, and I said, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing that. Unfortunately, I can't sign the agreement due to certain things on there. I said, but thank you again. Keep me in mind for the future. I wish the tour great. So I didn't think much of it, thought it was going to end at that. And I get an email back like maybe 15 minutes later, and it says, oh, why don't you edit it and send it back to us, and we'll see if we approve of your edits. That is like asking the photographer basically, okay, you don't get rights to anything. You kind of, and that's one of the things I wrote on there. I said, you guys have rights to use them for promotional use. You can, share them on your Instagrams, your social media accounts, all that stuff, share them on the website, but you cannot use them for commercial use without permission from me. I will not be providing you raw files. I'll provide you the finalized JPEG edited files, and I'll be able to send you 3 that night, but you're not getting 30. You'll probably get maybe close to 15. Because I think a lot of people, too, don't understand that us as photographers, we're not going to share every photograph that we take of that show. We're going to kind of pinpoint the ones that really, really show, how that concert looked. Well, I wrote that immediately. It maybe took a minute, and it was denied. Like, he must have just saw the part I edited, and he just goes, denied. I was like, okay. And I just wrote back, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And I never worked with that particular manager or that publicist again on there. But, I was just interested if you ever had anything like that. That's why.
Yeah, that's asking a lot for, I mean, sure, here's my price per image. I'll send it over to you. You can pay me, but it's that's a lot to ask, especially, I don't know. That's just that's excessive. Yeah, I haven't heard that one that bad.
Yeah, for me it was amazing because yes, Kenny Wayne Shepherd is an amazing guitarist, but he's not. It's not like you're photographing Godsmack or Shinedown. These big, or even Papa Roach kind of thing. But yeah, that I remember getting that, and I was just like, and I've talked to other photographers about it, and a few of them have gotten different things. Have you ever gotten one that you have signed as, well, let me ask you this. Most of the stuff that you do, is it for you, or are you doing it for a publication all the time, or do you kind of go back and forth in between?
Recently is for me, for my publication that I had, for probably the last, year or so, when I decided to start my own publication. So I was, doing it for me, but also I had other contributors that would, request shows as well. So I was managing it on that front, as well. And then prior to that, I was with a different publication. So it's always, for the most part, been attached to a publication, whether it was someone else's publication or my own.
Yeah. How do you deal with having other people on your team? Did you have people come in that you would get the shows for? They would photograph them and send you the images and stuff at the end of that?
Yeah. So when I started it up, I had actually, a bunch of, photographer friends, that I've met either in person or, through Instagram, that are, all over the country, ask, if they could, shoot for the magazine. And, for the most part, I would say, yeah, sure, absolutely. Why not? So I was just, really kind of managing them, and they would send in, requests for shows that they wanted to do. And then I would personally handle, all the reach outs, for that, keep things organized, on an Excel spreadsheet, all that good stuff.
Because it gets pretty tough. I tried to do that a couple times, and that can be trying to balance. It's pretty tough.
It is tough, and in the beginning it was tough because I had maybe I took on a little bit more than I could chew with contributors. But after a while it sort of dwindled down because I've had some that would shoot the show and then not necessarily remember to send me the photographs.
Oh gosh,
yes. Things like that happened. I mean, it was only once, and thank God. But then it kind of dwindled down to a good core, 4 or 5 contributors that were pretty active, and it got a little bit easier to manage that way. But as long as you keep everything organized, again, like I said, I used an Excel spreadsheet of who the contributor was, what the show was, where it was, who the contact is, and either approved or not approved, and it was pretty easy to keep track that way. And just kind of put reminders on the calendar to follow up if I haven't heard back from the PR person. That's another thing that folks should starting out should know too, or understand is don't request a show 3 months out from when that actual show is, because you'll likely not hear back from that PR person. You're mainly requesting the shows 2 or 3 weeks out for the most part is what a lot of at least the PR folks that I've dealt with have said.
Yeah, a lot of them will. There's certain ones that if it's a band, I'll say like Dropkick Murphys or even Papa Roach, to be honest with you, because of the notability of those bands. Oh, geez, we sent ours for Papa Roach was 2 months ahead of time. Now, like your point, I know the publicists. Right. So as you're saying, yes, if you're starting off, you're not going to you have to kind of build that relationship. Right. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, Papa Roach is one of them that we had to send in pretty early. And Dropkick Murphys, we actually sent in a year.
Wow.
A year before, because this was one of the tours that they had done, and they hadn't done a tour in a while. Mm-hmm. We had to fill out an entire, it was like 2 pages. We had to fill in our demographics, everything on there to get approved for that show. But yeah, you're absolutely right. For anybody starting, definitely the 2 weeks. Is that what you normally do? Do you normally do like 2 weeks ahead of time?
Normally 2 weeks ahead of time. And then again, depending on the show, if it's a little bit larger of a show, I'll do it, maybe a month out, just to kind of get, myself on the radar. And then with festivals, obviously, you kind of do that a year in advance. You have to fill out the whole press form and all that stuff. So for festivals, I would request it, as soon as it's announced, which is typically a year in advance.
One of the things too that a lot of people, like we talked a little bit about before, about the respect aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And some people, and I've heard horror stories of this, that if you're working with a publication and you're reaching out to them to want to work with them, and I don't know if you might have kind of similar thoughts on this, so I'd love to hear what you think. But if you're working with that publication and that publication gets that for you, do not screw them over. Do not just not send pictures. Do not reach out to them when they're trying to get the information, because I think a lot of people don't realize that the publication is working directly with the publicist, who's working directly with the manager of the band.
Right.
And so that connection, if you decide that, well, I'm going to go take these pictures, photograph them, and screw that guy, I'm just going to get the pictures, do what I want, you're actually harming the publication, because now we have to go back and say, listen, I'm sorry, we trusted this photographer, and I've had this happen twice, trusted this photographer to do this. What is your point of view on that? Like, what would you tell people that might be coming in to want a photograph for your publication or publications in general?
Yeah, just as you said, don't screw the publication over, because that's one surefire way to, not get into a show for the foreseeable future. Because a lot of publications talk to other publications, and if word of mouth gets around that, hey, this person screwed me over, it's not going to work out too well for you. and also it's a respect thing. The publication's going out on a limb to, maybe they haven't worked with you in the past, and this is your first time, photographing a show for them. They're taking a chance on you, saying, okay, we'll work on getting you a pass and they get you in. Just shoot the show, send the photographs, the edited photographs over that you want to share, and do the right thing. Don't just say, okay, great, I got into the show, got a free ticket, got my photo pass, I'm just going to take the photos and drink all night and not send anything over to the that's another thing. That's maybe a sidebar thing, and I don't know how you feel about it.
No,
but
I was about to.
When I see when I see photographers in the pit with a beer, I don't know. that maybe that's another thing. But
no, for me, if I think we might be on the same page with that, to not do that.
Yeah.
That's my stance on it. I actually had to tell a photographer who was contributing for F28 on the contract, because the photographers that contribute for F28 have to sign a release with us, stating that you are going to give us the photographs, you're not going to be a jerk face, that kind of thing. And one of the things says on there, you cannot drink until you're done with your job. Right. Like, once you take the photographs, if you want to go party all night after that, that's fine, but you have to finish what you have to do. So yeah, sorry, that was a good side note on there, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Because I mean, no one wants to receive blurry photographs. So
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's really, the publication is, going to bat for you to get you into the show, on the premise that, we get you into the show, we get you the photo pass to be able to photograph this band, and maybe it's a band that you love, but in return, it's a job. So in return, you're giving us the photographs from the shows so that we can promote it and this, that, and the other thing. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to the show, I'm going to photograph just so I can put it up on my Instagram and, be done with it. No, it's, the publication's again going out on a limb for you and getting you into the show. So do the right thing and, do your job.
And that's the thing I think some aspiring music photographers don't understand as well, is that your name can get around. It can, especially if you're in a situation where you're working with Live Nation, who is the largest promoter in the world. In a lot of cases, I've been to Live Nation shows. I've seen photographers get kicked out.
Yeah.
Of that show. Sorry, my cat Xavier is trying to jump on the board here. Don't jump on that board. No, stay. But I've seen photographers get kicked out during the show just from not following things. I've talked to Live Nation reps, and I would see one photographer at a show, and I wouldn't see them again. And I'd be like, wow, just out of curiosity, what happened? And it's not this black book that's in the background kind of thing, but they all share like, hey, just to be ahead, this photographer came into the pit drunk, don't allow him at your venue. Okay, or this photographer came in, they tried to get backstage with a fake pass, they got backstage, we kicked them out, they're on the the blacklist, don't let them in your venue. So things like that get spread out. So yeah, one of the most important things is the publication you work for, respect them, and then two, that does go around. You got to be smart, because you're most likely going to see or deal with these people on a regular basis, and maybe even not like the next month, but you might see them the next year, and that's kind of crazy.
Exactly.
How it goes around on there. What are you prepping now for 2021? Do you have some shows that you want to start getting due, or are you going to do any of the shows? Because I think some shows are opening up the end of this year, right? I thought I heard a few.
I'm not sure. I mean, I was, getting set to do, or hopefully do, the Five Finger Death Punch
I know,
tour.
gosh.
And their first stop was here in South Florida.
I was so sad when I heard that ended.
And to see that it got canceled for a second time, I mean, I was kind of expecting it, but it's still kind of a bummer. But at least down here, I don't see any shows happening for the rest of the year, at least here in Florida. But for 2021, it depends on when these folks reschedule their dates. I've been looking at it, but I've been taking a cautious approach, I guess, to it, because I just don't know what's going to happen. And I'm sure some of these publicists don't know either.
Yeah, it's tough. I think this year has been extremely weird for everybody in the music industry. Anybody that works in it. I mean, even just people in general, what's going on. I mean, it's just really, really bad. It's a horrible kind of thing.
Yeah.
With the shows coming up for 2021, what advice would you give to aspiring music photographers that are looking at 2021 as, getting into it or wanting to be a part of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the great thing right now is what I have been seeing is, a lot of local places are still doing live music. So, in terms of like just your local bands, so I'll revert back to what I said earlier is, start that now. If you have, if there's a restaurant or, a bar that is, depending where you live, a bar or brewery that is open, and has live music, get your camera in there and just, start shooting and getting your portfolio ready for, the shows that you want to shoot, come 2021. Because the more you do now, especially if you don't have any sort of portfolio right now with live music, that would be a good time to kind of start doing that, laying the groundwork, and that way when you do start going out to these PR firms or maybe the bands that are opening up, they're smaller, they're independent, maybe go that route too. I did that early on as well. That way you have something kind of already prepared and something to show them, like, this is my skills, this is what I can do. And start getting in touch with publications now as well, and kind of laying that groundwork so that, you could hopefully attach to one of them to get into, maybe a quote unquote larger show than your local bar.
That's smart advice, people. Listen to that. If you are an aspiring photographer, take that, because that is absolutely smart advice to give. So, John, before I let you go, I do want to ask a couple quick questions. These are questions that a lot of people ask me to ask photographers that are working in the field and also artists and bands. So I'm going to give you some questions. Answer them as quick as possible. Now, some of you might not want to, because I might give a question about favorite band, kind of thing like that. But one of the things that I'm going to ask, so I'll start with the question, but the first one is, what do you always need with you that you can't live without when you're in the pit? Besides the camera. I'll take that one besides the camera.
The camera. In my personal situation, I need my glasses so I can see.
Okay.
That's a big thing. But I would say, also a comfortable pair of shoes.
Oh, that is great. That is a great, that's awesome. I never thought of that. That's a great, actually, because you do a lot of standing.
You do a lot of standing. You do a lot of running around in the pit. So definitely a comfortable pair of shoes.
All right. What is the best show or favorite show that you've covered so far?
Oh, man. That's a good question. There's been quite a few. Well, I will say, surprisingly, it wasn't Bring Me the Horizon. It was a good show, but there's just other factors with that show that were not as cool. I would probably say August Burns Red. The last time that they were down here at Revolution Live, that was a sick show.
So
it was
good
probably they're so good, and they were the headliner, and. Oh, it is a damn good show. Packed, probably oversold the place. It took me probably 10 minutes to get out of the pit because they don't have a dedicated area to get out. So I had to go through like the floor.
Probably
took me about 10 minutes. Yeah, and I know it's probably a little longer answer than you're looking for.
No. Those are I know exactly what you're talking about when you have to walk through.
Yeah,
and it was it's long. Oh yeah, it's horrible.
It was awful, and I had obviously there's about 3 or maybe about 5 photographers in total in the pit, and one gal that was probably 4'5". So having to help her get out of the pit as well. Literally, like a security guard, grabbed me because people were standing on the stairs too. Literally grabbed me and pulled me through these line of people. I felt so bad. But I kept knocking people down because he was just pulling me through to get me out of there. So that was definitely a sick show.
What is the camera lens? I know we talked a little bit about this before, but what is a camera lens you will never, ever live without?
Definitely my Sigma 30 millimeter.
Is that an f1.8, f2.8?
1.4.
Oh, wow. 1.4. Going big time on that one
right
there.
It was I did a lot of research on the lens that I wanted, and because people go between, okay, do I do sort of zoom lens or do I do a prime lens? And sometimes it depends. I think Prime's the way to go, personally.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But that's the one lens I probably couldn't live without. I use it for everything.
What is the worst show that you've covered, or we'll even add to that, covered or have seen live?
Well, I don't want to shout anything.
Anytime I ask that, people are like, I don't know if I want to say that.
Well, I will say
you don't have to. You can plead the fifth. That's fine.
No, I mean, I would probably say, because I'm not maybe just not a huge fan of that type of music, but well, the headliner absolutely loved Beartooth, but they were playing with some of the more hardcore bands out there, like the Knocked Loose of the world. And this particular show just wasn't good because their singer unfortunately had an emergency. It was not a good situation.
Oh, jeez.
Family emergency that he had to deal with. So they did the right thing in bringing people in, but it was just not for me.
I always like to say when I ask that question, because I know it's kind of tough for photographers to want to admit that kind of thing. Me was 21 Savage. It was the boringest. And it wasn't, I heard a lot about his show that it was supposed to be really, really good. And we went in and he just stood there and didn't move at all. Just stood there, not moved at all. So that was one of the shows for me on that sense that I was like, okay, I'll pass on. I'll pass on the show again for that one on there. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. Is there anything you want to let people know that you've got upcoming? Because we're going to have a link for your website. And also, let me mention that to people. Go to f28live.com. You will see an actual blog there with John. It'll have all of his information, website, links to his work, also any kind of contact information to reach out to him. We'll have some samples of shots on there as well. John was kind enough to send those over to me. So we'll add those on that blog spot. But is there anything you want to mention to listeners right now of anything upcoming or that you want to share with them?
I mean, unfortunately, nothing in the music world upcoming. But, just on the other side of the photography work that I do, commercial stuff, that's ongoing. So if you look at indiecreative.net, as you said, you'll be linking it. That's where you'll find a lot of the brand work that I do. So you'll probably see, a lot more of that upcoming over the music stuff, unfortunately. But hopefully, next year we'll turn for the better.
That's what we're hoping. 2021 is going to kick ass. That's what we're all shooting for on this. Well, John, thank you so much for being here, man. And I got you on Instagram. I'm going to follow you. Everybody, you will see his Instagram profile on the link as well on the f28live.com. So click on that. Give him a follow. Show some love. Thanks again, John, for talking with us, and we will talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, John. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.